In Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood claims victory, but it's the army that seizes power. Mohamed Morsi says he's won the presidential election, but the military insists it is in charge. Has the democratic revolution been hijacked? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Mike Hanna. Welcome to the special edition of Inside Story from Cairo. Egypt's Supreme Military Council, Scaf, has issued a series of amendments to its own constitutional declaration that effectively limit the power of the country's incoming president, and many would argue cement the authority of the generals in this post-Mubarak era. Scaf also seeks to control the drafting of Egypt's new constitution. The once all-powerful position of president has been made largely ceremonial, some argue, and the move to civilian rule has been put on hold in the interests of what the military calls national stability. It's been a momentous 24 hours, as Shireen Tadros reports.
It was meant to be a declaration defining the role of the president, but it's more like solidifying the military's power. In a news conference, the unelected ruling military council, or Scaf, laid out their new laws. Essentially, the army says it will be its own boss. The new president will not be commander-in-chief. Scaf has given itself control over the budget. And in the absence of a sitting parliament, the military council will retain what it calls limited legislative power. Rights groups and revolutionary forces describe the amendments as a consolidation of military rule, legalizing a process that began last year when the military took over the country. It renders, they argue, completely meaningless the handover to civilian rule, which is meant to take place in just 2 weeks' time. In an interview with Al Jazeera, head of the Scaf's advisory council said the new president would be transitional.
The upcoming president will occupy the office for a short period of time, whether or not he agrees. His office term will be short despite the huge efforts exerted in the election campaign. This is simply because a new constitution will be drafted, followed by new parliamentary elections to take on the legislative power. And therefore, it is not possible in any event for the president to remain in office after a new constitution comes to light.
As the military entrenched their rule on the ground, the Muslim Brotherhood declared their candidate Mohamed Morsi the next president. According to their numbers, Morsi won by about 1 million votes. His opponent, Ahmed Shafi, insists their numbers are incorrect and counting hasn't finished. Official results are expected on Thursday after appeals are considered. Who the next president is may still be unclear, but who will ultimately hold power in the country is. Shireen Tadros for Inside Story, Cairo.
In this presidential election, the option, in the view of many Egyptians, was limited, described by those advocating a boycott as a choice between a military state or a religious one. Well, how did it come to this point, and what is left of the democratic revolution? To discuss these questions and more, I'm joined by my guests. Sameh Saif El-Yazal, former Egyptian Army General, head of Al-Gumhuriya Center for Security and Defense Studies. Rabab El-Mahdi, professor of political science at the American University in Cairo. And Amra Darag, the regional head of the Freedom and Justice Party for the Giza district and a professor of engineering at Cairo University, importantly also a member of the current Constituent Assembly, which is one of the things that we'll be talking about. But to begin with, Sameh Saif El-Yazal, some would argue that what has happened over the past week amounts to a military coup. What's your view?
Well, I disagree with that, Mike. In fact, when you go through what happens, actually, it was not planned. Even the declaration of the Constitution yesterday, people said it was planned. Now, I fully disagree with that. If you see what happens, they announced the declaration before even closing the polls last night. So without having even any idea the indications of the results, whom they would go through. So the point is, they have actually did this amendment without knowing if the Shafiq will come with the military background or with Dr. Morsi will come without a military background. The point of having this as a coup, again, is not correct. Why? Very simple. Because even the legislative power is between their hands for only 4 months. So it's not talking about years, not talking about long period. It's only for limited period, which is 4 months. As soon as you have the new constitution and the referendum, and then you will have 30 days after that, you will have a new parliament. They will disappear, and the legislative power will be gone again, or will be directed again to the parliament.
Well, we'll discuss that issue of timetable in a moment, but I just want to hear from you first, Rabab El-Mahdi, that question of, do you see this as a military takeover? Was there a plot? Is this design, or was it chance?
It's a complete coup, there's no doubt about this. In terms of timing and in terms of the content of the declaration. In terms of timing, again, why are they issuing a constitutional declaration now, whereas the president should have taken power? There is a constitutional declaration already in place that has enough powers that the Supreme Council has been exercising. Those powers should have been transferred to the president. Let alone the new constitutional amendment takes over the legislative power from the dissolved parliament back to Scaf, the Supreme Military Council, gives Scaf immunity in terms of its formation, the longevity of its members, staying there without anyone, including the president, having control over them, takes away the power from the parliament in terms of the constitutional committee, again to Scaf, and allows Scaf not only to form the constitutional committee, but in case any committee is formed, that they can actually contradict any of the proposed amendments by this constitutional committee. So here we're talking about a complete coup, a taking over of judicial powers, of the constitution, of legislative powers and executive powers.
Mubarak, I see you nodding your head to that. Do you agree?
I totally agree with Rabab, and I would like to add to that a court decision, a court ruling, a constitutional court ruling, to that 1/3 of the parliament was not constitutionally formed. That was used by the military council to totally dissolve the parliament. So that was the first step of that coup, in my opinion. And then I totally agree with Rabab, and I would add everything. I don't think I can add anything to what she said. That's a perfect coup, in my opinion.
I have a comment on that, Mike. Can I have a comment, a very quick one? Well, actually, Dr. Rabab mentioned that there was no need for a new amendment. I think without having this amendment, we'll be in a chaos. Number one, according to clause number 30 in the previous constitution resolution, that
in the constitutional declaration,
constitutional declaration, I'm sorry, the new president has to go to 1st of July to the parliament, and because of what's saying and what has been said in the constitutional declaration, that he has to go over there and be thrown in front of them and say that he will take the power after that. So without the parliament, where to go? Then you need to appoint another place for him to go to do that, and that's why you needed that declaration.
That was one of a series of amendments.
The second one, now we don't have a parliament. That's the situation right now. Okay, then the legislative power goes to whom? All right, I tell you a secret that since last Thursday, when the Constitutional Court came with this verdict, they have been, of course, studying that, how to deal with it, and all this kind of stuff. They asked the High Constitutional Court to take the power of the legislative power to them. And they said, we cannot do that because they are judges. They cannot do the both way. All right? So then, if you go back to 11th of February, they have been giving the power. They didn't ask for it, right? Including because of the parliament, the previous parliament, Mubarak parliament, has been disassembled. So they took that power from the parliament. And then they give it to them when they have the new parliament elected. And right now, there is no parliament. Then that power goes to where? You need someone to do that. And the only point is to go back to them and give it to them.
Rabab El-Mahdi, your view of all this.
Yeah, I have two comments. First of all, let's not pretend that the Egyptian judiciary is independent and not politicized, because it is, very much so. The parliament has been threatened. Since there was an Islamist majority, it has been it's been continually threatened by the military in terms of being dissolved, in terms of not being able to form a government. So throughout the way, this legal fetishism and the legal formalism taking you into a maze of what comes before what. This is something that the Mubarak regime started during the 18 days of the revolution, when he said that he couldn't step down because this would create a constitutional and legal vacuum. And when we pressured enough, proved that this whole legal argument doesn't stand. Now the military council pushes and insinuates the judiciary to take decisions, and then comes back taking this as a justification to issue a declaration that not only takes the legislative power, but also the executive power from the upcoming president.
But the issue is that we have a legal process involving the country's highest court, the Constitutional Court. That is the supreme legal authority, whether one agrees with the decision or not. There is that body fills the vacuum. But Amra Darag, that issue that Rabab referred to there, the constitutional power that allows, for example, the court to act. You have a 1971 constitution which appears to be pushed aside. In the court's recent decision, it was based entirely on the military's constitutional declaration. It made no reference whatsoever to what was the constitution of this country for decades.
I'm afraid not even to the constitutional declaration. Actually, what happened, General Saif al-Yazal was referring to that the military council had to do that because there was no parliament. But why dissolve the parliament from the first place? You know, there was a ruling. We have to differentiate between the ruling itself and the consequences of the ruling and how this ruling is being implemented. Okay, we can say that, well, this ruling is fine, 1/3 of the parliament is not constitutional, fine. But in order to implement a decision based on that, to dissolve the whole parliament, this is what everybody does not agree to. Okay, so what we believe is we already do have a parliament, and we do not have a problem that dictated the council to issue a declaration. The other thing is that by this declaration, I also disagree with General Sameh that...
Although we are friends.
Yeah, we are friends, of course, but I totally disagree, unfortunately, on this one.
Please.
Because this is not just a limited power for a limited period. If we allow the military council to form the Constituent Assembly that is responsible for drafting the constitution that is going to be there forever, this is not a limited power for a limited period. This is a power that is eternal. You know.
Let's just get to that particular point, though. In the amendments that were announced by the military, it is said that the current Constituent Assembly, of which you are a member, remains valid, despite the fact that the body that chose it has been dissolved. However, it's put the Assembly on notice in a way. Unless things get done within a week, it can nominate its own Constituent Assembly. Do you see this as a direct threat to you?
Of course it is, because that's back to using the legal institutions in Egypt to pose a threat to the constitutional bodies. If there is a threat that there is a court case in front of the court about dissolving the Constituent Assembly, and based on that, we know that it's going to be dissolved, and based on that, we already have planned. Tell me, before even going through all this, how come yesterday there were a lot of discussions in the government, in the cabinet, between Prime Minister Ganzouri and some other legal experts about forming a Constituent Assembly without even having any problem with the current Constituent Assembly? What on earth has the Prime Minister anything to do with that? Why is the Scaf directing this at this moment? So, you know, if you put all these together, you come up with, unfortunately, you come up with a body that is trying to grasp all powers it's not just, by the way, this is not just the legislative power, it is the executive power and also the constitutional power. So we are in a form of a total, I don't even see it as going back to the status before the revolution. This is even worse. So
I'd like to put a particular point to Saif al-Yazal, though. You mentioned there the threat to the Constituent Assembly, yet there has been no advance within the activities of the body or the thought. There has been a lot of criticism of the original constitution of the Constituent Assembly. There's been massive criticism of the composition of this particular one. Is there any case for the military actually getting tired of this argument and saying, get on with the work of drafting a new constitution? Do you think that there is a public view that sees that?
The military actually hasn't got anything to do with that. The court case, which is going to be actually in court tomorrow, Tuesday tomorrow, for that particular issue, is not raised by the military or Scaf. It's raised by a normal lawyers in Egypt. This is number one. Number two, regarding what my friend Dr. Amr said regarding this committee and that the Prime Minister was seeing somebody and talking about it, when you have a court case like that, first of all, we have to agree about one point. Do we respect the Egyptian courts or not? Do we respect their verdicts or not? If we do, then we have to listen to them, and we have to do we have to actually implement their verdicts, like the highest court in Egypt. This is the Constitutional Court. Tomorrow we're going to have a court case, and we have to wait for the result. That's why when you have a court case, then 50%. You don't know where you go. 50% you're going to get a verdict for that way, or another 50% for the other way. So what happens is the Prime Minister starts to have some meetings and to listen to advisors for such a case, because you never know. You don't want to be surprised tomorrow by a verdict which you are not ready for. So you have to be ready for any case. That's why they started this. It doesn't mean that it is the point that they know the verdict. That's why they're sitting to have scenarios for that verdict. No, it's not like that. We are respecting our courts, and we are waiting for the verdict, and that's why they are having scenarios for every possibility.
Well, let's put that question to Rabah Barmati. Do you accept the authority of the court or not?
That's a good question.
Personally, of course not. Of course not. As I said,
but as an Egyptian citizen, with looking at a constitutional system that is in place at the moment.
This is not, before we talk about the rule of law, let's first talk about how corrupt the legal system and how politicized it is. The process, General Samih Saif al-Yazal was talking about those quote-unquote normal lawyers who go to court and go against the Constitutional Assembly. And this we've seen happen a number of times throughout the Mubarak era, with supposedly what we call muwataneen shurafa, the good lawyers being pushed by the system actually to feed those kinds of cases. But I totally agree with the point that you've made earlier, in the sense the Muslim Brotherhood have messed up big time through the past few months. It managed to alienate political forces. It was very snobbish and pretentious and overwhelming in terms of how it dealt with others on the political scene. And Scaf is counting on this. Supposedly it thinks that it managed to alienate the Muslim Brotherhood enough that it can actually now seize all powers from them, and hence not allow us to have this kind of transformation.
I'd like to bring that to you, Amr Darag. Has the Muslim Brotherhood been its own worst enemy in this process? Has it created, as is being insinuated there, a gap for those who were opposed to it taking political power?
We have to address 2 points here, 2 separate points. One of them, suppose that the Muslim Brotherhood and Freedom and Justice Party are not behaving the way they should be, and all that, and they have a lot of mistakes. Still, we are talking about the overall legal and constitutional system in Egypt. As a political power, we are prone to make mistakes, and this does not justify the military council to go and grab the power the way they did. I mean, if we did, well, by definition, any political power is prone to make mistakes, and that's how sometimes this power is elected, sometimes it's not elected. So this is not a justification whatsoever. We can talk about that, and I admit that yes, we made mistakes, but everybody in Egypt, all political forces in Egypt made mistakes. And I believe that we have a golden opportunity right now for all political powers in Egypt, patriotic political powers in Egypt, to unite and get together, because the threat that is facing Egypt is not just to the Muslim Brotherhood. or the Freedom and Justice Party. This is to the future of Egypt, and everybody has to unite behind that. And from here, I'm saying that we are going to do every effort to make sure that this unity takes place. If we made mistakes in the past, we are willing to acknowledge these mistakes and also get over that, and ask also other political forces to do the same. And we can sit together, because the threat that we are facing is for the whole of the Egyptian people. This is not related at all to any mistakes that have been committed or not, because this is something that we can disagree on.
I just want to get back to a point that was made a little bit earlier ago. From Safasaf Al-Yazal, I heard an intake of breath when you used the word corrupt with relation to the legal system. Do you see the possibility, though, that in the public view, the Constitutional Court has taken every decision which appears to be in favor of a military agenda rather than a revolutionary public one?
Well, first, let me start by saying I completely disagree. I repeat, I completely disagree that our court and the judges are corrupted. Completely disagree with that. And I believe we have an excellent justice system in this country, and the history of those courts and the history of those judges are very clean history. And I have never seen any, I would say, a serious issue that those guys, they are human beings, yes, but that those guys done mistakes by, I would say, by corruption, or they want to really affect the justice in this country by doing that. So the point is, I believe in our courts, I believe in our judges, and we have to respect them because they are respected people, period. And I don't really want to discuss anything about that or hear anything about that, because I completely disagree with that.
Well, Robert El-Mahdi, I want you to pick up on something that was said here. Is there the possibility now that, given this turmoil, the legal, constitutional turmoil, that a body like the Muslim Brotherhood is getting wider popular support because it is seen as a powerful opponent to these processes? Do you think that is something that's been reflected in this presidential election, for example?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look at the presidential election in the first round. Dr. Mohamed Morsi got a little over 5 million votes. Those are the number of people who Dr. Morsi was their first choice. If you look at the second round, you'll find that he gets more than 12 million, meaning that there is 7 million more who voted for Mohamed Morsi, even though he wasn't their first choice, but voted for him in solidarity with the Muslim Brotherhood against a candidate from the old regime, against a candidate who he himself is a military general. Again, a lot of political forces will give up, and this, I think, how mistakenly Scaf underestimated the situation. A lot of political forces, some of which were very much hurt and defamed by the Muslim Brotherhood, will stand in complete solidarity and support, including things like other presidential candidates' campaigns who supported Mohamed Morsi, activists from the so-called secular camp who will continue to support the Brotherhood in their fight against those who have the weapon, against a military dictatorship, so to speak.
Well, Safasaf Al-Yazal, very briefly, is there a positive light in all of this? We've heard about alliances of political forces, perhaps a greater degree of political unity, whatever the political beliefs of these groups. Is this the one good thing, perhaps, that's emerged?
Let me first start by, nothing wrong to be an army general, by the way, or a general.
No, but we want a civilian president.
As if it's an insult.
No,
nothing wrong to be.
Very briefly,
with presidents being generals.
Anyway, yes, I can see light at the end of the tunnel for this country, definitely, even with the Muslim Brotherhood leadership in this country. I don't think they will be giving the opportunity to make another fatal mistakes for the country of Egypt, because Egypt is a big country with a history and civilization. So the people in Egypt now, the other group of non-Islamic wings group, or secular, I don't really agree about secular, but liberal people or whatever, other groups, other political groups, will not allow the leadership to do fatal mistakes for this country, and will be monitored properly. And believe me, yes, we do have a good future, inshallah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this particular discussion, but there's a lot more to talk about in the days and weeks and months ahead. Many thanks to our guests, Sameh Saif Al-Yazal, Rabab El-Mahdi, and Amra Darag. And thank you for watching. Your thoughts and ideas are welcome. Just email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna from the whole team. Goodbye for now.